Hey, folks, pardon my um, wobbliness. It's been one of those afternoons, actually all day. But I'm Nick Tucker. This is the Historical Fencing Guild. Hope you're having a good night. Before we get into it, I've got some bills to pay. So first and foremost, I have to put a shout out to our good friends over at IndieCD.org. Yes, the Independent Creator Directory, your one-stop shop for the best and the brightest authors, musicians, creatives. Basically, if you want to be hosted online, that is the place to go. And if you're looking to hire someone, that is the place to go. I'm not just a spokesman, I'm also a member. We are also made possible by sales of the simple sword, the fighting axe, and the simple spear, all part of the ongoing series of Western martial arts manuals devoted to helping you guys find the art that you have. Instead of inflicting a fighting style on you, it is about teaching everyone to find their own. I'm very proud of what I'm doing in that. And I'm very proud of everyone involved. We also, if you see this link, if you're planning to make any purchases from Purple Heart Armory, or even just check our good friends over at Purple Heart Armory, please go through using this link. I get a small portion of the sales, I believe 2%, but more importantly, they understand that my viewership is a lot of their customers. So if you come to me and say, we would really like to see something get made, a trainer, a large size trainer, you need to make more of something, I will have more weight to my ability to speak to them and say, yes, please, can you make this? Can you make that? Etc. I would love to get in a position to do a bulk order for several trainers. But we also have a Patreon. And my patrons, right out in the bottom, off in the woods, Frog G, Ronald Rain, Bladed Thesis, Brian K. Morris, Cindy Kep, and Steve Augusto. These wonderful folks are who allow me to keep the programs going. I had a hiatus out of necessity from being active on the Patreon, and it is winding down. I have a lot of things in the works that I'm excited about. And if you want to be a part of it, you want heads up and you want discussion rights. Because basically, if somebody contacts me through Patreon and says, Nick, will you do a program on this? And they have thrown money my way, I make that happen because I try to serve them as much as I serve the local, well, relatively local Historical Fencing Guild in providing a place for them to train, providing gear for them to train with. That's what I use the Patreon money for, and to expand some of the attached business ventures to keep the cycle going. Versatility and cunning are all necessary for doing what we do. Now, tonight's a little different. I had a point that was asked of me, and it was a simple question, and I do love a good simple question. That question was, what is superior, a single-edged sword or a double-edged sword? Now, this is a very spicy question because a lot of it depends on what you're doing. As I am someone who dabbles in a great many styles simultaneously, there are some points. And I want to get into that. I want to talk again about sword lengths versus hilt lengths, because that's something that I think needs a bit more discussion. People ask about that. And then any questions or comments that are coming through the assorted venues. As usual, for the people who either are watching this broadcast through Twitter, and there has been some glitches with their commenting, or are just not wanting to comment on that. I've had people want to direct message me. Those who have access to my direct messenger are more than welcome to fire off questions, comments, etc. to me, and I will try to catch that. I prefer to work with the people who are on screen because it keeps it as an open conversation for everyone. But first through the door is Foxy. Good evening, Foxy. Evening all, and Thesis. And Foxy had a wrap for dinner, and now I'm chilly, dang it. And no such thing as a better sword, only better for you. And see, that's part of this question, and I get a lot of these, is academic. And it's not even just academic. It's a point of discussion, but not terribly valuable. Because what's the best sword? Good Lord, that depends on what you're doing and what, your body type, what you're doing with it, where you are. Good evening, Trelena. And preferences. So you have to match the sword you are leaning towards with the styles you fight and the situation you're in. I know a lot of people who immediately go to, well, obviously, a great sword. I've got all that reach. I've got all that, the circular. I can defend a large area. I am far away from my opponent. I can put buckets of power into it. And that's great if you are in an open field by yourself. A great sword is used in a lot of anime. It's used in a lot of films. Used in a lot of games. And everyone's greeting Trey. And it's a wonderful weapon if you're by yourself and you have that wiggle room. Because contrary to the shenanigans that AI loving Australian prattles on about, uh, they're harder to draw, they're a pain to carry, and they don't work well indoors or in actual brush. If they were versatile, as some people would think, they would still be in use. And save for certain situations beyond ceremonial, they're not really that common. Because most times, if you are going to go to the effort of having a two-handed reach weapon for practicality, weight, production, effectiveness in a lot of ways, it's much better to take the length of a great sword, make that a pole arm of some kind. Can I get a spear up in here? And have better control and range adjustment. Great swords were weapons of a specific period. They went against armor and tactics of said period. They're delightful in that folded center. And because they are large, they look impressive. They tend to be swooshy. Now, the next set of people you hear who respond to what is the best sword will claim the katana. I got one over there. It's hung up as the best sword. And there is a lot of merit to that with certain caveats. A katana is a very effective mid-range sword. And its attached weapons, the wakizashi and the tanto, are incredibly effective in a wide variety of places. The guard is limited. The style that bends around it tends to be more of a quick draw, let's go style, when remembering this is very much a sidearm kind of sword, which most of the swords were. I say that because people get caught up in the mythos of what was necessary to make the katana functional. So I would say a katana with modern steel techniques. Now you can fold it, you can make it pretty, but modern quality steel changes a lot. However, I do find many, many, many modern katana to be a touch on the overly rigid, but because they like that the differential hardening. So abusing a katana is more likely to make it break. So it's a very good sword for, unarmored or lacquer leather armored individuals, it is a slight curve both for ease of draw and slash. Yes, you can chop incredibly effectively with them, to the point that in modern times, the cutting tests established for a katana are still the ones used by most people to evaluate any sword's cutting capacity, being the tatami mats on the stick, slice. We've all seen the videos. And if not, you really should. They're fun to watch. But the length is still a little long for some situations, which is why I kind of favor the wakizashi. And they can be a little fragile, and the guard may or may not do what you want it to do. Still, it's one of the most popular swords in the world. It is not what I consider the most popular sword in the world. And that's where we're going to end up. Very close talking. So we have that. Now, and hi, Kitty. Good to see you. I am at heart, and I will always be at heart, a rapier fencer. The proper term is rapierist, but with my speech impediment, I try to avoid that term. Now, Nick, you were going to say single edge versus double edge, and I will talk about that. I really will. But we need to go through the overarching weapons before we can get to that little discussion. I'm sorry, it's been quite a day, and I'm actually just a little winded today. The situation with that, you go through the katana. Another sword that people talk about is a rapier. Now, our rapier's incredibly effective at taking an unarmored opponent and making them die with a well-calibrated thrust. Yes. Are they fast? Yes. Do they provide remarkable protection to the hand and body? Yes. Do they pair with a lot of great things? Yes. But a rapier's weight is very much on par with an arming sword. Its balance is different. And if you are just using a rapier, again, you can get caught up with some of the rapiers with the same length problems you find with a greatsword. I mean, when you start trying to go places with, a lot of people I know favor 40-inch rapiers. That means it's a 48-inch metal stick swinging at your hip. That can be problematic, to the point many rapiers carried a dagger or a poniard as a backup weapon in the proximity of others. Okay, so a fairly civilized weapon. And yes, doors, very good point. With any sword, doors become difficult. And the rapier is, due to its narrow cross-section, potentially more fragile towards breaking than some more thicker, girthier weapons. Now, this is where we start to get into interesting things. The counterpoint for weight is a arming sword. And an arming sword, this, I can hold up a rapier any day of the week. That's not my arming sword. That is my, where did my arming sword go? Anyway, that is not in reach. And I'm rather annoyed by that, because it should be, but I'm in the middle of moving things around. So it looks a lot like this, but the hilt stops here, and the blade is 4 inches to 6 inches longer. Okay? That is a wonderful, resourceful, single-handed sword. Now, I will tell you, if I can't imagine a sword with one of those swing-around doors. The way one gets through a revolving door with a sword is if it is on a loose frog, you pull it up straight, holding it basically like this because it's going to be a fast action thing. You don't want to be higher than your normal height. And you keep it pressed to the chest, go through, and then return it. That's part of the reason why many frogs used from the Middle Ages through the uh, Renaissance and beyond were loose. They had a chain so that they hung loose a little lower on the hip. That made for a more natural grab, and it gave them options to adjust how they grab, much more than a fixed mount, which a lot of people see and think of. With a shorter weapon, you can get away with fixed scabbard. You're fine. But any real length, and it becomes problematic. So, okay. Nick is talking about the versatility of rapiers, but not, and admitting some of their weaknesses. A rapier can cut. It can't cut as well, but you can cut with a rapier. You just, it just seems like a cartoon gag. It kind of could be, Foxy. So let's go across because I'm going to try to keep weapon classes very similar. We could talk a djinn. Now, most djinn that I have seen vary a bit, but fall somewhere in the length and balance between a arming sword and sometimes a hand and a half sword. So ignoring this hilt, this is not bad actually to be a djinn. Very lightweight, very fast. I have, of course, the better one, which is over there by my katana. By the arming sword, I just didn't want to back all the way across the room. That's not bad because as they evolved, the djinn kind of went very much in the similar parallel evolution of the rapier towards the small sword. In that they got lighter, they got easier to carry when not in military applications. Okay? And a weapon such as that can be easily navigated through civilian life. It's double-edged. It can cut pretty well. It can thrust extremely well. Okay? Now, you have that. When you go to something like a Dao, again, the style starts to limit it because a weapon that's more based on cutting is harder to use in civilian settings. Usually, and we're going to get into that. But you have, just like the saber and the rapier are very much saber, rapier, and small sword. Wow. Saber, rapier, and small sword. Saber, epee, and foil. It's almost like there's an evolution there. Anyway, you get the single edge, more cut oriented versus the double edge punch or thrusting oriented. You have the same thing with the djinn and the Dao. And I am giving I'm sure right now Thesis is quite fired up because I'm giving a very, 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 very bonehead simplified version because this is a survey course style right across the top. There will be weapon styles and variants that, exist as outliers. This is broad generalization, and I admit it freely. Okay. We've gone through that, and we see the same thing with rapier and sabers. Sabers filling in for arming swords in very similar uses. Militarily issued, many times excellent hand protection. But as soon as you get good hand protection on anything, even a rapier, this is my beloved cup hilt rapier. It needs love. But I have worn this extensively over the years on different rigs, and it can be bothersome. And this is only a 34-inch blade. It fits. I can make it work, but any bigger, and I'd have a lot of trouble with it. So while this is my preferred training style and my preferred fighting style, or very similar, you have to realize it's not necessarily the most practical. Now, it does get interesting when you look at the evolution of saber and rapier from the grips. Most sabers have a single flat grip, no keyhole, because it's based on powerful cuts. They're fluid, they go. The curve may be exaggerated. There was one exception where the beloved Spanish, who really know their stuff about swords and don't get nearly enough credit, came up with something during their period of horrible colonization of Mexico. And that being what's referred to as a bilbo. It has several other names. I want to say 1783 issued Charles I want to say fourth, don't quote me, Charles V. Rapier, not rapier, technically considered a broadsword. And you get something like this, roughly this length, thicker in the body, a little bit longer, broader blade. So now you have a very strange thing, because you have the protection of a saber, or very similar, including the knuckle duster. Love me a good knuckle duster. You have the keyhole grip of a rapier. You still have a short weapon, which is easier to fight with for an untrained individual, because you have to realize when you're dealing with a military force that such equipment is has to be mass produced, and this is where we're going to get into some stuff, and it has to be uniformly taught, because that it is not being issued like a personalized weapon to fit your style. No, this is how we fight. This is how I keep you from dying. You do this, we go, and then you fight the enemy. It's been the same across all nations, across all borders. Unless you're a mercenary where you get to pick your own toys, or you're a British officer from a certain period where they had a lot of, because they were responsible for purchasing their own commission, which means they had to buy their own sword, they could do a lot more customizing. And you get into weirdness like Spadroon, which is fairly universally loathed, and certain models are universally loathed. But a saber is very effective, gives good hand protection. Length, it can thrust mightily, but boy, can it cut. And of course, the curvature either expands or contracts to the point that late period sabers, the end of the sabers, the last commissioned saber that was used for as a combat weapon, not ceremonial like the Marine Corps sabers, which is a whole different universe. And the Marines, they're different, and we leave that there because everything's a knife. For the Army anyway, was designed by one Lieutenant George S. Patton, and are fairly, good evening, Miss Saren, are fairly mundane in overall appearance. The single cutting blade, Uh, Basically a triangular cross section distal taper, stout guard, straight. And the reason it's straight is they did not sword fight from horseback all that much in saber style. Instead, it was fought much more like a passing lance. So it was for a saber charge lance style, which is fascinating. Hello, Ogre. You have been on my mind lately. Haven't seen you in a while. Looking at that, monstrously effective, but for the with the effectiveness of firearms and with the sheer bulk weight of kit that any soldier in any period carries, a lot of times they were removed. And the other thing is, a saber, like any other military sword, save for one that pops to mind, was a dedicated sword. It was a dedicated weapon. It wasn't supposed to be used as a tool as much as a machete or an axe or things. Were they? Of course they were. But that's not really what they were made for, and they weren't really good at it. The German hunting swords, which were shorter, single-edged, saw backed on the spine, were one of the original multi-tools. And they were actually quite handy for all those sorts of things. They were halfway to being a hatchet and quite formidable. But what good are long-range rifles? Hi, Johnny. What good are long-range rifles if the enemy soldier knows jujitsu? That depends on the placement of said enemy soldier. No, and this doesn't take me off topic. No, I didn't. I did not check. I did not see that. I've been busy with several other things today. I thank you, but they're if they know jujitsu, it's delightful because you shoot them from a long ways away. Remember, God created man. Colonel Colt made them equal. And yes, you did the psychic damage in that my brain was telling me that I had to dyslexia somehow the order, because understanding close, ugly hand-to-hand fighting will always be a necessity for the military. No matter how advanced our weaponry gets, there will always be points in combat that come down to just two or more people in the blood, mud, and guts trying to do horrific things to each other for their country, morals, or organization. That's the nature of warfare. And the other thing about long range rifles is, remember, a long range rifle often can come with this little implement called a bayonet, turning it into a surprisingly effective spear. I believe the most current bayonet charge was in 2017, and I honestly can't. I know the Americans in Afghanistan had one, and the British in Afghanistan had a case for one, and it was monstrously effective against the opposing forces because they ran out of ammo, both sides basically, and they did not expect a proper bayonet charge, and it actually broke the ranks of the enemy, and they scattered. But yeah, location, 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 absolutely. I love swords, I do. but firearms tend to have greater range and effectiveness. That's why they fell out of favor in most places, most ways, but not all. And I know I've skipped over a large number of swords because I've tried to keep them arranged by function. Okay? And if we go, the other thing, the definition of what is a sword versus what is a knife becomes very important to this conversation. Because you look at the kukri as carried by the Gurkhas, you look at the bola knives as carried by the Filipinos, and you look at what's commonly referred to as the machete, which is carried by everybody. And you find the irony that comes back to when somebody asks what sword is the best, they usually are asking what sword type is the best. This is Sting in polyform. Sting is a double-edged, bellied sword. You will find these throughout the Bronze era. Very similar style weapon. One of the first designs, right out up there with the weird things like the Kopesh. You make it straighter and it's been there longer. A remarkably functional and brutal weapon, only improved by the evolution into iron and then steel and beyond into some of the stranger alloys and polypropylene, at least for training. Yes, good old Xiphos style. If you're this length of sword is still popular, but if you are carrying something in a world of firearms, it has to be able to do multiple jobs. It has to be a versatile tool that you can possibly dig with. I'm going to stop and put some Krieg love to the combat shovels of the assorted Russians and Soviets. Gotta love the combat shovel. It's a shovel. It's an axe. They can throw it. It's delightful. But, and I don't actually have one handy here. I have a fancy version. The most common sword, if you want to define a sword, how you define a sword often is a katana. They're the most of those with all the fair ones mass produced theoretically in America, I believe. But the most common sword that is used, and 1 second, I have to put something up. Here, I need to go trained professional, do not attempt, is a machete. Oftentimes with a 22, 24-inch blade, sometimes longer, usually single-edged, usually, again, straight. Simple to make, cheap to make, simple to carry, rugged and effective. Now, this machete has thrust capability. Many don't, or have very moderate. They're basically heavy-bladed butter knives. But they work. You can cut through your opponents with them. You can cut through the greenery with them. You can baton them easily to split wood if you're not carrying an axe. For a lot of projects, if you don't need precision, you can do knife work with them as long as somebody's not standing too close to you. This is a formidable weapon and tool. And this odd length that you find, that 18 to 24 inches across the world, the basic scale of humanity is drawn to a single-edged weapon that works like that over and over and over again. So by popular use and versatility, not preference, you know, the machete in its assorted incarnations is the world's most popular, most used day to day to this day. As swords, I suspect, have been used for ages. Sword. And now I deliberately skipped over the dussock. I deliberately skipped over the dussock and the farm knife, as well as the messers. Most of your messers, unless you get into your Krieg messers, functioned much like large machete. They were single-edged. They had knife scales to get around the ATF of the German period, saying that, oh, peasants can't have swords. Delightfully effective. Many people, including Skallagrim, like to take a colossal raging derriere poop on the dussock. A dussock usually, and the broad definition, it is a rough, forged, one-piece weapon, many times without scales. They might wrap fabric for a grip, where the width of the blade narrows to a spike. Spike curls around to form some type of guard. Sometimes it crosses, sometimes it doesn't. They can be made in a couple hours. They are the most peasantly of the peasant swords. And they were made as as agricultural tools as much as they were weapons of defense. The neat thing about a dussock is, yes, they're very simple, they're very crude, but on an incredibly low budget, with very little time comparative to a lot of things, and very little specialized training, a small town blacksmith could easily arm a large number of people rather effectively with something that they have the muscle memory to use. They were machete of the period. So, what is the best sword? The best sword, dear friends, is the one that you have in reach at the time you need it, that will not fall apart. That's the answer. It's not a pretty answer. It's not a shiny answer. It's not glorious, elegant, refined, academic fighting. But it is the most pragmatic response to that. And let's see. Tea. I love tea. I am a dwarf and I'm digging a hole in your face. Yes. Messer, machete? Machete? Yes. It's a practical answer. And if you ask me, you're talking to the guy who is delighted that he has found a rusty, battered ball-peen hammerhead at Goodwill for $2. It's currently in my truck. It still has a fairly damaged handle on it, so I won't feel bad about taking the handle off of it. I am delighted because that will make a wonderful cane head to me. This is an incredibly practical mentality. And when we're looking at what swords are, we have to step out of the glamorous, beautiful mindset that us romantics have on them. We have to look at the item without our rose colored lenses. We have to be practical and go, what works for what we're doing? Now, I don't know about you. I don't have beaters and armor bearers and, you know, camp cooks and all this other stuff to follow me around if I have to go short out. Yep, ball peen walking stick. I'm if I can get a hold of get the very old new to me vice set up somewhere I like, and maybe access to an angle grinder and a Dremel, I may turn that into something beautiful while practical. And yet, practical is good. Practical is very good. We have to understand the reality of what it is and what it's used for. And then we have to make that use happen if we are handed it. My lawn sword is perfect for what I use it for, which is being a two-handed machete. It cuts through a lot of brush. It cuts through a lot of branches and limbs and things with great effect. It is not pretty. It is not stylish. And I'll be honest, I'm not terribly fond of the grip on the damn thing. Pardon my French. But it works. And that matters. So that answers the question, I think. If you are watching this in the later and you want to wade in, please wade in. Please give me commentary and we'll discuss it. For a more indoor personal defense, I like. They have renamed the Priscilla. It's a Shroud bush sword. I like this thing. I like it enough that I have it actually rigged so that should I choose to, and I have to adjust this rigging system a bit. I have to make some choices, but I can wear this. I can carry it. I can make this go inside or outside, and it's surprisingly effective at clearing brush. But I mentioned leverage, which means I have to get up for a second. Ouch. And come over here without taking everything and its cousin out and grab what I want to grab, which is my I.33 arming sword as put out by Purple Heart Armory. This is a basic trainer. It is all polypropylene. The blade is one piece with paracord. It's purple. It shows up on camera. Cool. And a cross guard. This gets its striking power of balance. And I realize I got to fix something. So its point of balance is way out here. Okay, let me find it. My hand's shaking a little bit, so I'll be eating some M&Ms briefly. But the point of balance is nearly a foot, maybe 10 inches out, maybe 8 inches out onto the but this is going to give it significant striking ability. The pommel can counteract the weight. Now, if I wanted to make it lighter for me to use in feel, I would drill a hole here and I would put washers and then either use a rivet or lock nut and bolt to hold it on to pull the weight, they'll pull it back and make this very agile. Be slightly heavier overall, but much more agile. Now you'll notice when I move it, I naturally tend to adjust it about at the point of balance because that's what the weapon wants to do. The point of balance doesn't want to move. So that's one way to add power. Another way to add power, however, is to go from one hand to two. Now, technically, this is meant to be like a 1.5 style. What would be a short bastard sword? This fits me remarkably well for several of my fighting styles, which is why it's one of my favorites. I can keyhole grip it. You may get to see if I can find the right material to make the bell. This slide down, and I may just reach out and say, "Can I order another couple of these rubber bands? Because I want to put a bell on it and make this into, an S-Talk is the best talk." But by counter striking, so this hand is pushing that way, this hand is pulling as I do my strikes. I'm not just simply doing this and holding balance. You'll see this a lot. What you should see is that you want the leverage to be working in your favor. It's pivoting here, not here. And sorry, my fingers aren't quite working right. This is going to give you a lot of strength and superior control. And when I let go, though the blade is shorter by a measure of about 4 inches, 6 inches. Let's see. I always forget. Yeah, 6 inches. Whoop. There went another. It's weight, it's point of balance, and let's play with that. I think that's a good idea. The point of balance on this guy is right here. So it's about half the distance from the guard as the other one. A little bit. It's not perfect, but we can get it. Making this very light and agile, one-handed, instantly two-handed. And you'll watch the Jin guys, the two-finger. This is the support hand. You know what you can do with it? That. You could do all your Jin stuff that has this support hand. You could just change over to a grip if you have room. It's not a bad thing to have both hands on your sword. And if you are carrying a single weapon, having both hands on your sword is not a bad idea. Now, if I have a sword like this, I want a shield. And we live in an era, guys, where a lot of the perception of fighting and sword fighting has been influenced by what looks good on screen. Shields don't look good on screen because you can't see the person behind them. Helmets with face protection don't look good on screen because you can't see the person behind it. You get it? Go watch Jill Barrett's stuff. You'll watch this lovely, lovely stage fighter, martial arts woman. I respect her incredibly, even though occasionally we slightly disagree. Occasionally and slightly. Rage because, no helmet. We don't have that in film. So that is shown as superior. Johnny, your anime protagonist is showing again. Can I have a real cool hoodie on instead? Are you cautious enough to have a real cool hoodie? Anyway. Although, it's funny you mentioned that, a company named Destroyer Mods did make an armored hoodie for a short time for light fencing that was sort of one of my holy grails of items I was chasing after, and they stopped making it. Sucks. As I'm losing weight and I might be able to get into some of the funner armor stuff, they do that. But leverage gives longevity. Weight gives power. Please give him more hoodies so I can steal them. Thanks. Then I'll need both your sizes and like the pertinent information for that so that you can. Because I want you to be able to steal his hoodies, Saren. I want you guys to make very wonderful people. Thesis. Never. I need to look like Enzio. That's why I get two. The other thing is, my dear John, if we are distributing hoodies, I would make sure that Miss Saren has access to a hoodie that is so perfectly detailed to her preferences, she wouldn't want anything else. It can be done. And then she'll steal it anyway. Welcome to being in a relationship, my friend. The funny thing is she'll probably steal your Assassin's Creed wrist dagger bracers too, which is her prerogative. She's a lady. But the point on that is you have to find what works for you. And I tend to lean towards what works for me on a bad day. So, even though I love rapiers, oh, I know, sir. I hold you to a higher standard. Johnny is my pet vampire who has a whole bunch of teenage girls lusting after him. Things are getting delightful in that campaign. I'll talk about it later, but well, not here, but later. Thesis doesn't do hoodies. Thesis tends to dress like an extra from any quality kung fu film, and I'm okay with that because it's a good style from what I've seen. But when you're looking for the best weapon, think about what you're going to do with it. Think about it as a full experience. Because my answers aren't going to be your answers. And frankly, as much as I love swords, they're very likely not going to be my first go-to for a relatively long length weapon, depending on my situation and how much things like survival are involved. See, hoodies are a bad idea. Can't see peripherals, and honestly, I think they look gangster, not my style. And frankly, on you, sir, we've discussed the tactical situation of avoiding what's acute, resting B face. Some people have accidentally intimidating features. And my first go-to are running shoes. Oh, I'm all about it. New Balance for days. First tactic is get out of there. You're always right. And the way with what you do, Johnny, I have no doubt that you could get in and get out. But that's not the question people ask. See, most people are of a vaguely fantasizing mentality. I knew this was coming. There's a hooded Dagua that tempted me for many years. My version of Assassin's Robes, of course. I have some Saucony shoes. They are comfy. Like, I've been wearing New Balances since 1997. And they are rather good shoes. Not as good as they used to be because they went overseas in production. But do they still count as running shoes if all you can do is fast hobble? And that's where we start getting into if you can escape, what can you use? How can you defend yourself? and there are options. And some of them are quite delightful, and some of them are very unpleasant. And there's a sliding scale, and there's a responsibility for the use of any of them. I am moderately formidable with handguns. I can understand that. It is a very select situation. However, I have nerve damage, so my hands tremble at points. I can't rely on that ranged weapon as an approach. So, and I wish it would just let me copy the text. See, it doesn't let me copy the text on my screen when I'm operating here, but this is a link to the product that Thesis is recommending or lusting after. So if you have to fight, you have to use what you have. This is why I like Joe length staves, hiking stick lengths. I can do a lot with that, and it bothers people versus the cane. Now, I want to, it's been a while since I've made a nice ornate cane. So I am really kind of in that place. But that isn't necessarily the perfect solution for all settings. Now, when I was an avid camper and hiker, oh god, my answer would have been totally different. Like, why would I carry a knife or a machete? A big knife. I don't need a big knife. I need a little knife that does stuff. Everything else I can do with my axe. And I would probably, if I'm hiking long distance, carry something like what's called a boy's axe, which is slightly shorter than a lot and about a 2.5 pound axe head on the end. Inexpensive, efficient, you can fell trees with it. I'm more likely to wonder, how am I going to carry a saw-like device? Because you have to go from the mentality, are you a soldier? Are you paid or duty bound to engage the enemy in mortal combat? If you are not paid or duty bound to engage the enemy in mortal combat, or in a place where you are defending yourself, which comes under the duty bound, why are you engaging the enemy in mortal combat? Why is that such a high priority? If I'm out carrying things like that, I'm most likely to be camping, hiking long distances, or either for leisure or survival. Then I want the kind of tool set more likely that I would be able to do things with to establish a homestead, which is an entirely different mentality. So it gives you something to think about, an interesting thing to think about. Because, I mentioned swords versus axes, swords versus spears a lot. If I have a short spear, maybe something only 6 feet long, depending on the head on it, I might have a shovel, but I have a walking stick. I have a crossbeam I can use for certain applications. I can hunt with it, because hunting with a sword is a lot harder than hunting with a spear. I can throw it if I need to. There's a lot of versatility. But you won't find that. You won't find that if you don't think in those terms. You are the main character of your life. Act like it, but you aren't the main character of everyone's lives. The world is much more like being in a RPG with a group of people than it is being the main character of a book or an anime. The farmer across the street is now mowing to interrupt my shows. That's okay. False advertising, they will melt in your hand if you squeeze it. With that, though, we've gone an hour on a very interesting conversation. I want to put a thank you again to all my wonderful patrons who let me keep this show going. Thank you to all the good folks who have bought books like but not limited to The Simple Sword. And I again put out the call. Please message me directly through whatever means you have. What next manuals you'd like me to work on. I have some game design stuff that is pressing in the build up to September when I'm running a small gaming convention. But I want to be a part of, I want to make sure that I'm making products that help you. Now, there have been some discussion on short sword discussion. I might make a manual on that. Just need to know what serves you all the best, because that's what I'm here to do. I will be back next week at this time for another Historical Fencing Guild live stream. And on the sister network to this channel, I will be going Monday, Wednesday, and some person. Thank you, some person. And hello. Take a look at Nick's books, The Simple Sword, The Simple Spear, and The Fighting Axe, as well as his other books, Amazon.com/store/Mr. Nicholas Anthony Tucker, the second /author B07P26PSF3. And thank you for everything you've done, some person. With that, guys, I'm going to wrap up. I have actually a matter with a local guild that needs my assistance that I have to adjourn to. So I'm going to do that. Please keep your guard up. Keep your eyes open. Be kind to yourself and each other. And as always, dear friends, thank you for supporting your local swordmaster. We'll be back real soon. Sorry you came in at the last minute. And if anybody needs anything else from me, reach out. I'm a nice guy. I'll be happy to help. You all should know that. Toodles.